If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. With the election just 2 days away, we're having a crescendo of the same old kind of banter that we're always subjected to. But don't get fooled, folks. Some people are going a little bit wobbly in the knees and going, well, maybe I need to go ahead and support one candidate or the other. While I'm not here to tell you how to vote, I am here to ask you why you're doing so. The number one issue isn't abortion, no matter what Kamala Harris may try to tell you. The number one issue happens to be the economy. And that being the case, the economy isn't really relevant to everyone else the way that it is to us because it hits us harder than it does anyone else. And that's by design. So when it comes time to talk about the economy, don't let anyone on the white left or the white right get you to use their words. Just because we're all having economic problems doesn't mean it's for the same reasons. See, when they talk about the state of the economy, they're not talking about us. Because there's always been economic ups and downs, but for the black community, we've always been in an economic depression, no matter how the rest of the economy is doing. Doesn't matter how good Wall Street's doing or Main Street. We're always the ones on Skid Row. When the Great Depression hit, white people were the ones jumping out of windows and losing their minds, but for black people, the only difference we noticed was there were a few extra people in the unemployment line. That's the reason why we require economic policy specifically for us. We are specifically targeted as a group for economic deprivation, and that means any sort of remedy must be specifically for us. That's the reason why you've been seeing these white supremacist trash like Ed Blum and other right-wing white supremacists running around attacking anything that's geared toward leveling the playing field for black people. And you notice that nobody in the Democratic Party, absolutely nobody at all, is talking about how they're going to mount a counter-effort legislatively or judicially to knock these racists out of the box. Now, why is that? They claim to care about black women so much, but you got Ed Blum who's putting together lawsuits specifically going after black women, and you haven't had any of these Democrats saying boo about it. Kamala Harris ain't saying anything about it. The Congressional Black Talkers aren't saying anything about it. Vivica Fox ain't saying anything about it. Now, what does that tell you? This is because the Ed Blums and the David Horowitzes and others, they're doing the white left's dirty work. They both work hand in hand. These feeble courtroom tactics by the white right are in fact what the white left wants to happen so that they can tell us phony reasons why they can't do any policies precisely for us. Out there in California, they didn't even need Ed Blum to run interference for them. Gavin Newsom was telling the legislative black caucus out there, just make sure that that reparations bill never makes it to my desk. And that's exactly what they did. He had them on strings. They played their pathetic part like the puppets they are. But understand, in the years to come, you're going to be finding more of the white left and the white right getting on the same page against us. They'll be using the exact same words, the exact same rationales. The white left and the Bernie Sanders will go from saying reparations isn't feasible to Joe Biden and others who are going to be saying, well, it needs to go to Congress. And then finally they'll be saying, well, you know what? We think it's just unconstitutional. At some point, they're going to be trying to get there if we let them. When it comes to attacking us, they're not interested in pursuing policies that specifically target those who discriminate against us. That's what's actually unconstitutional. But then again, ingraining anti-black racism into the social fabric is the entire point, and both parties are on board with it. So while there are aspects of the election that are important for us to at least comment on, let's make sure we don't lose sight of the long game. The single biggest aspect of the economic crisis happens to be the housing sector. And as I've already explained to you, Kamala Harris is in the hip pocket of America's largest landlord, Blackstone. And she's also getting whispered sweet nothings in her ear by America's second largest landlord, BlackRock. Now, that being the case, that's the reason why she hasn't been saying anything about what's going to be done regarding all of these big corporations and these big investment firms and hedge funds who are literally buying up entire neighborhoods and then declaring that all of those homes that they bought are no longer on the market for sale, they're only for rent. As far as putting together an organized legislative offense against this, you're going to have to wait a while because the entire point is to make sure that these big donors get to rape the economy for as much money as possible, stuff it in their pockets, and maintain all of their wealth, always at everybody, read black people's expense. That's what Kamala Harris is concerned about, and that's why she's not moving on the housing crisis. While there is a cost of living crisis, which is actually a cost of housing crisis, it's because the main source of the problem and the thing that drives most of the problem happens to be housing. This is what makes it where young people are not able to get their first homes and start getting on the ladder to try to build some sort of generational wealth, which is usually the house. That's the biggest investment that you got. But for black people, no matter what's been going on with the rest of the population, we've been enduring a non-stop cost of living crisis for 150 years. It's like talking about a recession. Well, we've been put into a recession and held there by political and corporate policies. Our recession has been nonstop from day one, and it's been engineered. There's no such thing as an economic cycle for us. It's only when it affects non-black people that it suddenly becomes a national problem. When it affects only black people, well, that's not a problem at all. It's the society and the economy working the way it's supposed to. It's a personal failing on the part of black people. And you got some of the richest folks in America who are pushing this stuff. Donald Trump's been on the campaign trail with Elon Musk, and all the stuff that Elon Musk has done, you would think, has made him very unpopular with the white left, but not inside the Beltway. Why is it that Elon Musk is the ultimate welfare queen, yet he aggressively is supported by both of the major parties? Musk bitterly opposes government subsidies, or so he claims, and yet his companies are some of the largest recipients of government subsidies in human history. So is it really opposition on his part or perhaps jealousy? As he sees it, nobody's supposed to get government money except for him. Elon Musk built his empire on government money, and it was given to him by successive Democrat and Republican administrations alike. Tesla was the result of the U.S. government and states like California putting unprecedented huge tax breaks into incentivizing people to buy electric cars. But the same thing also goes for SpaceX. The government funded that one too. A lot of the right-wing trolls and hangers-on like to call Elon Musk Tony Stark, but phony Stark would be more like it. He's the biggest single recipient of government money in living memory. He certainly wouldn't have his empire without it, and yet here he is whining about others who do the same thing that he and his brain-dead racist cheerleaders all overlook, because to them, he represents a validation of whiteness, or rather their own putridly racist version of it. But this is who Donald Trump's on the campaign trail with. And yet Donald Trump's not bothered by the fact that the guy who basically is the poster child for the Green New Deal is also one of his biggest boosters. You see how that works? When it comes to black people, all of a sudden everybody becomes politically fluid. Everybody can move left to right, and it's all right is all overlooked because they understand what the elections are actually about. It's not the Democrats versus the Republicans. It's white supremacy versus black decency. But they're not alone. There's also a number of other black people who ought to be speaking up on issues of relevance to us, but who are MIA at the moment. Ta-Nahesi Coates comes to mind. We, the black grassroots, have single-handedly made reparations an issue, not him. And yet you would think that the guy who the white media claims his article in The Atlantic kick-started the talk about reparations, where's he at now talking about reparations? He's not talking about it at all. He wrote a book. Was the book about reparations? No. He was all vague and non-distinct when he was testifying before Congress a few years back on reparations. He gave these empty historical references, but he never said cash reparations or even what form reparations should take. He deliberately left it where reparations could be, well, whatever anyone else wanted to call reparations. That was deliberate. Now, when it comes to the latest book that he wrote, only a part of the book, by the way, dealt with Palestine, not all of it, but nonetheless, he's been getting himself a whole lot of publicity, a whole lot of attention over that. When it comes to the Palestinians, he's not vague at all. Just like Mark Lamont Schill. There's another one for you. When it comes to sticking up for everybody else, these bootlicking Negroes, they always make sure that they're strident for everyone else. Reparations ought to be something that they all should be talking about. This is something that's actually big. This is something that's actually substantive. But these guys looking and going, ooh, we definitely don't want to talk about that. Yeah, so much for being the guy who kicked off the reparations conversation, right? So much for the guy who was supposed to be the one spearheading all of it. He's hiding in the doggone background. He's more interested in what's happening in Palestine than he is what's happening with black folks right here in the United States. Now, these bootlicking Negroes who play this game, it's safe for them to do because the Palestine bandwagon is a fashionable cause for the white left. That's who these guys want to be heroes to. Because regardless of if there's a two-state solution, a one-state solution, or a no-state solution, nothing that happens over there in the Middle East is going to affect what happens here at home. So that being the case, the Ta-Nahesi Coates and the Mark Lamont Shills know that it's completely safe for them to let their hearts bleed for Palestine. Meanwhile, if you actually want to change things, you have to change the balance of power in the United States. You're not going to get that from any other constituency. All these other groups are trying to find a comfortable place under white supremacy, and if you truly believe that there's some settler colonialism going on over there, if you truly believe that what's happening in Israel is actually racial and not religious, then you're going to need to actually deal with what's happening over here, because this is what's funding it. The United States is what's funding it. Change the condition of black people in the U.S., and then you will have taken away all the support for the war machine in Israel. But then again, it's all a sideshow, all a distraction. We have these simple-minded slackers like Lamont Hill and Coates losing their little TV gigs, risking that little old TV cable money that they got. But when it comes to black people, you never see them doing the same thing. If these Negroes had a platform at the UN or on TV, why do they never use it to put the Democrats or Republicans on the hot seat about reparations? Yeah, they're willing to lose their doggone livelihoods, allegedly. They're willing to risk their careers for a fight in the desert on the other side of the globe. When the reality is, if you actually wanted to help the Palestinians, then you would be demanding cash reparations for black Americans, because an empowered black community wouldn't be prioritizing the Israeli war machine. We would be keeping that money here at home. But it's very clear to me that many of you like what Coates did, and you like that these Zionist mouthpieces in the white media are angry about what he said. When those who are white supremacist adjacent take one in the teeth, that's fine. But I can't really give Coates a pat on the back for the same reason I couldn't do it for Mark Lamont Hill. You see, when you're black first, that's exactly what it means. Black first. You want me to stick up for your cause? Well, you have to stick up for mine first. Rashida Tlaib only gave one or two very tiny, very empty mentions to the police attacking black people. And she hasn't said one word about cash reparations at all. She is a straight Palestinian advocate, full stop. If anyone should be tripping over their shoelaces to get in our good graces, it ought to be her, but instead, as we see with so many of these immigrants, she's hedging her bets and calculating that she can get what she wants without doing anything to advocate for the tangibles that we're owed. Did you know the Palestinians have a seat in the UN? At least the Palestinian Authority does. Can anyone think of even one time when they have used their position in the UN to stick up for us, to support us? So that being the case, what the hell would we look like being ready to jump out a window to take sides for Palestine? I only support people to the exact same extent that they support me. If they support me a lot, then I'll support them a lot. They support us only part-time, I'll only support them part-time. And if they don't support us at all, don't you dare ask when I'm going to support them. This is the reason why black people need to start being politically mature. And what that means when it comes to all of these allies and such is that we don't get involved in third-party disputes. Why? Because you never see anybody else trying to get involved in ours, certainly not on our side. A lot of those folks who are at each other's throats over there in the Middle East, you let them get over here to the United States, where they're classified as basically white adjacent, and you'll find that they start immediately campaigning for a comfortable place under white supremacy. That's the same thing that the Irish did, same thing the Italians did, the Greeks, and the rest of them. When we talk about economic issues, we better understand everybody else is looking out for their own interest, and part of that means they're all looking to maintain the racial pyramid that is the American social order. Everyone who comes to the U.S. is excruciatingly aware that they stand on a foundation built on anti-black racism. White supremacy has assigned everyone else a higher place than us, and they're aware that their position is artificial. So whether they admit it or not, they're looking at us all the time, just like the white supremacists do. And they're also very scared of the prospect that our position will ever change. That's why we always have all these people who are at each other's throats, be it in Europe, be it in Asia, be it in South America, and yet when they come to the United States, all of a sudden they put that stuff aside. That's because the American social order is organized around the principle of a common enemy. That is black people. You got folks from Asia, whether it be the Koreans and the Japanese, these people hate each other over there, but they come to the United States and all of a sudden they're all able to have hands across America for Peter Liang. That is, as long as he killed a black person. Meanwhile, if you have Asians who have been killed by white people, they don't do that because they understand exactly the rules of racism. One of the best moves that we made was to bury that whole allies line of garbage that Ta-Nahesi, Coates, and others spout. Black Americans are a group. And groups don't have friends, groups have interest. Coates did not use the media attention that he was getting from his book to advocate for his people. Instead, he wanted to show how altruistic he is and how he cares for everybody equally. The only way that it would be in our interest to take sides with either the Israelis or Palestinians is if either one of them took our side. Then we're sticking up for someone who's helping promote our interests. As it stands, the Palestinians are as aloof and distant from us as the Israelis. So I'm not taking either of their sides. And I'm sure that with a listenership as large and diverse as this one, some of my listeners are perhaps Muslims or immigrants or both, and hence your sympathies are with the Palestinians. I get that. And while you're worrying about people being killed en masse over there, you better start paying attention to how black people are being killed with impunity over here, because this is where you actually live. And not one of your Palestinian spokespeople has made a cause celeb out of that. Be it economic or geopolitical, the only threat to white supremacy is black American empowerment. Everybody else on the planet has either sided with white supremacy or is just trying to swing the best deal they can manage from white supremacy. We, and only we, are actually trying to fight it. Palestinian statehood is not a threat to white supremacy. Practically all of those Arab countries over there are in league with white supremacy. Look at how the Arabs treat the Africans in those countries if you doubt me. That's why the white media didn't mind having ta-nahesi coats on so he could talk about Palestine, because no matter how that situation shakes out, it's not going to affect white supremacy one iota. Now cash reparations and the economic empowerment of black Americans, that would change everything, which is why they didn't have him on to talk about that and why he didn't volunteer to write a book about it either. This during an election year. You would think that with the 2024 election, and especially what's going on in California, he would be all over it. But he's not. He's looking for a white publisher to give him an advance, and then he's looking for white media networks to give him airtime to promote his book, just like all the rest of these Negroes that you see on white media cable. He's still on team white supremacy. Family, I'm sorry if he got hoodwinked by his phony, overblown political theatrics that took place on that CBS morning show. More people are talking about his book than were before. You think that's some sort of accident? I think they wanted that to happen. If they didn't want him to give his support for the Palestinians, all they had to do was simply not have him on the air. No one would have even known that his book came out. All of these people who you see, these sorry Negroes in front of the TVs, they're not saying anything about cash reparations or anything about specific policies for us. That's deliberate. White supremacy has the luxury of pretending to engage on the issue of Palestine because white supremacy was dominating the world long before there was a state of Israel. And if the Israelis surrender to Hamas tomorrow, white supremacy will still be in charge, and these same Palestinians that a lot of you are looking at as proxies for yourselves, you'll see them put aside all their differences with the Israelis and begin to close ranks against us. Just like all of these other groups who were at each other's throats in the past, as soon as the Irish got here, they made friends with the Anglo-Saxon cousins of their same British oppressors. I keep telling you this. Look at every war the U.S. has had in the 20th century. After those wars, the U.S. would allow those very same ethnic groups that it had beaten up to migrate to the U.S. And when they got here, they didn't join with us. They didn't even treat us with friendliness. They immediately got on code with the dominant society. From the Germans to the Italians to the Japanese to the Koreans to the Vietnamese to the Arabs. That's the pattern. Everyone can see it, except for a few soft-minded Negroes. White supremacy is sophisticated. That's why it's proven itself so adept at taking non-white people and then making them into useful idiots for white supremacy. So please don't let any of the chatter about the economy or about foreign affairs make you think that we're supposed to be picking some sort of dog in the fight. The only dog is ours. And ours has been starved for far too long, so it's time that we make sure it gets fed. And that means we focus only on what's in our interest, no matter how much scare talk that we get around the board. If these people are really so worried about Donald Trump and fascism coming to America, then it should be an easy decision for them to sit down with us and say, it's time to break bread. We've held out long as we can. They don't seem to be thinking that there's some sort of truly existential crisis because they're not acting like it. And you shouldn't either. Because as we should all know by now, the cruelest form of trickery is self-deception. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Sabrina Scott, Morris Bodden, Joseph Isaiah, Craig Simmons, and Gordon Gates. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.